Welcome to the Dynasty Tailgate Podcast. It is combine time in the NFL. Starts March 1st. It'll go on for about 5 days, which is exciting. So me and Joe here are going to preview it for you. So stay tuned here in a second. Let's tailgate. All right. So Joe, it is this beautiful time of year where we get to go measure people's hand sizes and watch people run around some traffic cones and do all sorts of crazy drills that don't really ever, you're not really sure how that ever makes sense to transfer to the NFL. So don't you love this time of year, Joe?
Yeah, because it apparently makes so much sense to people, and I'm just watching guys, run around out there and not really make any sense of anything. I mean, hell, I was just Googling how to measure my own hand size. So I will post my measurables to our Twitter account just to let you guys know where I would rank with all the quarterbacks in this class.
Yeah, and we get to see quarterbacks throw beautiful looking passes in shorts, which darn well is never going to actually translate 1-to-1 to the NFL, but we get to freak out over 40 times, and we get to figure out hand sizes. Yeah,
we get to watch the arm tracer movement of where their acceleration is and act like that's actually going to happen with the defense in front of them. So
exactly. So anyway, we still need to talk about it. So we're going to preview a little bit this year. So to preview it, I got 5 questions on the board. We're just going to take them one at a time, talk through them. Going into it. So I'm not going to talk O-linemen. I love the O-linemen. I love defensive players. We're just going to stick strictly to offensive players for these questions. So number 1 question on the board, Joe, Kenny Pickett's hand size. You think it's actually going to be under 9 inches, or do you think that he's going to somehow have stretched his hand into the 9 inches that everybody needs it to be?
I want to know what coach he's working with, that they have him in a hand machine just stretching it out. But I mean, last spring scouts measured his hand at 8.25 inches. So that's the unofficial measurement. I mean, that's where it's at. That would literally put him in the 0 percentile for any quarterback ever measured with hand size. When we were at the Senior Bowl, he wore black gloves on his hands the entire process. I mean, that's what he had the whole time. And I think that was deliberately done to hide his hand size. He knows people are talking about it, but he's still a super talented kid. So we can't overestimate what kind of effect that will have on his draft stock. Tomlin was clearly interested in him, and he was over there talking to him quite a bit while we were down there. And if it causes him to slide during the draft, someone may be getting stellar value just because of that. I mean, we see Kyler Murray had success, and that's all we heard the entire process was he's too small. I, for one, still agree that Kyler Murray is a little bit too small, but we've seen these guys perform and have success in the NFL. So what do you think?
I agree 100%. So we should mention that he is double jointed in his right thumb, and that causes somehow the hand not to fully stretch out the appropriate amount of time. So we've already had GMs, anonymous, and I mean, the Steelers have even put their name on it to where they're not really concerned with the hand size. The hand size is a big deal because if it is 8.25, we've never seen that before in the NFL. So that is fascinating to see. I think the bigger concern is last year he would have been a 5th round pick, and this year he is a 1st round pick. I think that is the bigger talking point going into draft season. But as far as the combine goes, I mean, if he measures in at 8.25, Joe, or even if it's like 8.5, I think that is going to be such a talking point going into the draft in April that I'm really hoping for the best for the kid, because if not, that's all we're going to hear is baby hands, small hands, like all these jokes about his hands.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard of the whole locker room thing and feeling uneasy. He's going to have that whole feeling from the combine straight into the draft there. I measure at 6'1", but I'm actually 6'4" because my knee's double jointed. It's really weird.
It's one of those rare conditions where
it's
it affects.
crazy.
I get it. Yeah, I guess we'll see. I'm not I'm not sure that it's going to wholly affect his draft value because I think any team that's going to have him come into a private workout or they're going to go to the Pittsburgh Pro Day to see him in person, like him throwing, like you can watch the tape, you can watch him throw. He's not like a big armed guy anyway. You can mention and say that like him in bad weather, that's going to be a problem. I mean, Joe, we were there the day it rained really hard.
Yeah.
He did not look good.
No.
None of the quarterbacks really did, but in particular, he did not look good. I'm not really sure what to make of that quite yet, but I guess you could like maybe he shouldn't be like in Buffalo. Like I think if you put him in a good weathered climate, he's going to be fine.
I mean, even in Miami, they get rain down there all the time. It's never pretty. So, get him on a dome team like the Texans or something. He might be something there. But I mean, I would be more concerned about this if he was more of a blue chip project or prospect, like someone that was like a can't miss top 5 pick. But like you said, compared to last year's draft, he's not there. So, it's interesting. It's something to talk about in the time, but I do think he's talented. He'll make it, probably as a backup. I don't, someone's going to draft him as a starter. I don't see that, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, he's more of a game manager, and I think that's how you have to draft him if you get him onto your team. So hopefully whatever team drafts him knows that going in, but we shall see. So on to number 2. This is going to be a big week for Malik Willis. Do you think that Malik Willis is going to solidify himself as the quarterback 1 in this class based on this combine?
Yeah, and before I get into this, I cannot overstate how underwhelmed I was with the quarterbacks in the Senior Bowl. Watching their tape all season and throughout their college career, they definitely had some stuff to go on. But watching them in practice and live action, I was very underwhelmed. I don't see what everyone else saw. However, really diving into it, this kid is an absolute athlete. He's got a cannon for an arm. We've seen this type of thing before. And even though it's rare for someone to make the type of transition to gain accuracy, the NFL is the place for someone to be able to do that. So in the modern NFL, athleticism is key. And if he is developed correctly, he could be a major weapon for a team that drafts him. So I think the NFL teams are going into this process looking at it that way. Hey, we can get the right pieces around him. We can, he doesn't have to win the game for us himself, but when he makes the plays he's capable of making, that's how we're going to win games. And that's how I see him going. So, yeah, I mean, out of any of these guys, he's got the most potential, I'd say.
I agree because he's got the built-in A+ trait with his legs like that. Yeah. You can't teach that. Like you can try to make it a little bit better, but the way that he was running in the game and during the week, you can't teach that. Now the arm part, he's got all of the power in the world. It's just he's going to need to be a Josh Allen type player. Like he's going to have to develop that accuracy throughout his NFL career. And I'm just hoping that when he's there this week, next week, that he can, show the teams that although it's not always the most accurate, that he is at least good enough and can contribute right away, straight away from a throwing motion as well. So I'm kind of curious where he goes. That's the biggest worry right now.
Huge.
Yes, because it's going to be a developmental process. And so whatever team gets him, you're going to need a good quarterback coach, good offensive coordinator that knows how to make a scheme. Like the Ravens, when they built that team around Lamar Jackson, that's going to kind of have to be what you do for Malik Willis, at least in the first year. If he can develop further than that, then you're golden. Like that's a golden goose right there. But if you can't, you're going to have to develop around his legs, and offenses aren't always great when you do that. He does have a bigger arm than Lamar Jackson, so I think there's a little bit more you can do, to whereas the Baltimore Ravens are a little bit more limited on what they can do through the air.
Absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing is you compared him to Hurts when we were watching him. You're like, I just can't get out of the Jalen Hurts thing. And it's true. I mean, watching Jalen Hurts, throwing definitely, is not great. But if you have him on the right team, you can see the plays that he allows the rest of his team to make just with his legs. So if you got him in that type of position, Philly didn't have that great of a defense this year, but if he landed on a team that did have a solid defense and he could be more of the, I don't know, the electric playmaker or electric game manager, if you will, like, make your plays when you can. If not, just throw the ball away. I mean, I think that would be the way that a team could have a lot of success with him.
Yeah, I mean, like literally the biggest problem I had watching him in the game and when they were going through the drills is if his first read wasn't there, panic time.
Oh yeah,
It was,
duck
do I
out and
use my
run.
legs or do I throw some wild pass? And in his defense, he used his legs because that was the appropriate thing to do. I mean, I kept telling you while we were standing there, like, just show your legs, just show your legs. Do not show him your accuracy. Just show, like, don't throw one of these wild passes. Just show your legs. That's going to get you paid. So
Yeah.
he did that. It was very well done in my opinion from that standpoint. And so I think this is the week where he takes that next step up above the Kenny Pickett's, the Desmond Ritters, that second level that, isn't really that particularly good right now.
Right. No, it's good. With a good testing day, I mean, you could see him really vault into the stratosphere to the point where teams are trying to trade for him and move up in the
Yeah.
draft and position themselves. So it's going to be something definitely to keep an eye on as we go through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is correct. Okay. So let's move on to Drake London, the wide receiver from USC. So I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not 100% sure that he's even going to test at the combine
Please
because he
do.
is.
Please
Yes,
do.
please do, because I want to see it as well. But he's coming off of an ankle injury. He's got to come back from that, make sure he's 100% healed. So he may opt out of testing at the combine. However, like you were saying, I want to see it as well. We've not seen a player of a 6'4", 6'5" that's 210 weight wise. That is such a very odd, specific weight and height that I need to see what kind of speed comes with that, because it's a very odd testing ground, I guess.
It absolutely is. I mean, you mentioned it, 6'5", 210. He really actually runs like he's on fire, but they're very precise routes. I mean, he's open downfield all the time. I don't think we've seen a guy of this size be such a downfield threat since coming out, at least. I'm not throwing comps on this, but, Calvin Johnson, that's kind of his game. I mean, he was huge.
Yeah.
He made it down the field. And if he could develop into that type of player, even, 80% of what Calvin Johnson is, the team that drafts him is getting an absolute monster. And if he tests and he does, his official 40 time could launch him into the top 5. I mean, it would not.
It could. It would have to be, I think, something crazy to do, because he's floating around the 7-8 range right now. Yeah. So could you see somebody maybe trading up if they think he's like that next level? I could see it. It's definitely possible.
In this NFL, yes. I mean, we've, everything's going to, call it the air raid offense or a adjusted air raid offense. Right. I mean, everything's predicated on the deep downfield throw, and we see it all the time. We saw it in the Super Bowl. We saw it with Cup in the divisional round. I mean, it's that type of play can literally bust a game wide open and go, and these teams are all trying to strive for that.
Well, his more direct comp is Kenny Gallaudet, which is Babytron. It's not Megatron, but it's Babytron. Kenny Gallaudet, 6'4", 214, 15, something like that right now. And that's kind of exactly what Drake London is measuring out at, like, right now as is. So, that Kenny Gallaudet, when he got into the league, he was a very useful player. I mean, this last season, notwithstanding, the rest of his career has been very helpful for Detroit. So I guess we'll see. I need to see him test. I know that there's a chance that he doesn't, and I would be very disappointed if he doesn't. But as far as going into this week, Drake London is one of those players you're going to have to focus on when we're going through and measuring players and their 40 times and all that stuff.
Yeah. As far as wide receiver testing, if he does perform, I think he has the most to gain from a strong showing of all the wide receivers here.
I think you're correct, because Treylon Burks, we know he's big, he's strong, he's tall. I think we kind of know what we're getting there. Garrett Wilson, he's short, crafty route runner. He's going to be like an Odell Beckham type at the high end. Further down the line, even Jameson Williams, who will definitely not test because he's coming back from the ACL. Speedster, going to take the top off of defense. That's kind of what we're looking at when we go with him. But Drake London, he's a 6'5" slot receiver. That's a weird one. That's one that you don't see very often. And being that skinny, I'm not really sure. So if he even weighs in at like 220, that's going to be huge. So I guess we'll just see what ends up happening next week.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of drawing of the Michael Thomas-esque player, which we saw have a ton of success there. I mean, Michael Thomas had him and Peyton stuff. But if he could fill that role for a team, that'd be awesome. And plus, get him on an NFL nutrition diet, and his weight will skyrocket. So I'm excited. I'm very excited for this guy.
I agree. So let's move on to the tight end class. So we saw pretty much all of the top tight ends down at the Senior Bowl, but there was one that was noticeably missing because he's only a junior, and that was Jalen Weidermeier from Texas A&M. I think the only question I have here is he going to be able to show enough at the combine to build back up to one of those top 3 or top tight end taken in this class, because he wasn't able to show what all those other guys showed, because Trey McBride, I think, is the leader in the clubhouse so far. And then right under that is Isaiah Likely. And then I've even seen in mock drafts that people have been doing, just random, that Jeremy Ruckert from Ohio State is before Jalen Weidermeier. And Jalen Weidermeier, before the season was going, he was the number 1 tight end. So, yeah. I mean, Joe, do you think this could be, what are you looking for when you come to Weidermeier?
Trey McBride showed a ton all year, and at the Senior Bowl, he looked awesome. Practices the game, he looked great. Isaiah Likely is just a very interesting, awesome, huge potential player right there. And with Weidermeier, I think what you're dealing with right now is a lot of that post hype from the Senior Bowl. We got to see these guys recently. There's not a whole lot to talk about, so they've been in the news cycles quite a bit. Before the Senior Bowl, a lot of places had Weidermeier as their top tight end target, and that was, a month ago. So you're starting to see these other names pop up there. I mean, if he tests strong, he could jump right back to the front of the line, in my opinion.
I think I completely agree with that. Because going in, he was the one that didn't have any question marks. Like, he was just the top guy. And to see that now, like, he's not even getting drafted in mock drafts. I mean, it was a 5-round mock draft I read. He wasn't mentioned at all in 5 rounds, and he was the top tight end before the Senior Bowl. But after the Senior Bowl, seems like everybody forgot. So I think this will be a good chance for him to wake everybody back up to what he is capable of.
Yeah, this is just one of those reminders for everyone in fantasy that when the news cycle is picking someone up, it's pushing someone else down, and that's a really good opportunity to trade for that person, grab that person, and go from there. But yeah, I think that's just the situation we're dealing with here. With a strong test, he'll be back 1 or 2 easily.
I can agree. All right, let's get on to question number 5. We're speeding through these. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Running backs. So I would like to talk about James Cook. He was scheduled to be at the Senior Bowl. He accepted his invite. When it turns out, like a day before or 2 days before, he decides he's not going to go. He's going to forgo Senior Bowl and just show up at the combine. My only question is, was this a big mistake for him? Because I'm not going to lie, Rachaad White, Dameon Pierce, like, I have them above him now, and I would not have had that had he been there, and definitely before we even saw that we were at the Senior Bowl, I definitely had them. I had them below him. So, Joe, did he hurt himself by not going to the Senior Bowl?
Yes and no. With James Cook, the first thing you think of is versatility. When the ball is in his hands, it looks like the rest of the game is moving in slow motion. It's just kind of him running out there. He's very electric. He's a very natural receiver. I don't think anyone in this class is quite to his level of just receiving ability. But he appears to avoid contact at any given spot, which with the way he plays, that's what he does. But when I'm looking at a running back, I'm looking for the guy that wants to take on contact and go from there. Now, in college, he was a decent pass protector. But I think maybe what happened is him and his agents or his coach or, whoever is guiding him right now, they saw those one-on-one drills at the practices, and they wanted to keep him out of that scenario. I mean, that's really after Dameon Pierce's block in that one-on-one drill. I've heard that mentioned everywhere. Yeah. I saw it firsthand, and I've heard it mentioned 1,000 times. I mean, if James Cook's out there and he gets absolutely run over on that practice, that could have hurt him more than just not going at all. So I think he's going to let kind of his measurables speak for themselves, get him on the field, check out his 40 time, what he does, his agility tests and everything. And I think that's where they're going on this one. So it's tough to tell right now.
I agree. The only reason that I say that I think that it hurt him is because he was in a split workload with Zamir White. And I think Zamir White kind of has, he is lower on the list. And I think he's kind of established himself as that's where he's going to be going into this draft process. But I thought James Cook had a chance to show above what he was. And the combine is the place to show that. I'm not trying to make it seem like him skipping out of the Senior Bowl, that was his one chance. But I will say, I think it started him a little bit lower. Like it's kind of like running through mud. Like you're starting yourself off in a bad spot. So it's like, I don't know why, unless he was nursing an injury that we didn't know about, or he just, didn't feel right going into it. You'd rather have a non-test than a bad test at the Senior Bowl. I think Brian Robinson that kind of really affected him when he did not really show much at the Senior Bowl. And now I kind of have like a bad taste in my mouth with him because it was a bad look when he wasn't very good in that game or in the practices. So maybe that's part of the reasoning here. And if it is, more power to him, because that will be a good call. And maybe when he gets to the combine, he will look like the best running back out there. Who knows? Maybe he looks better than Kenneth Walker or something. Like maybe that's just like the way he measures and the way he tests and stuff. Maybe that's just something that could possibly happen. But why not give yourself more chance to talk to NFL teams who are all at the Senior Bowl? Most of them are represented. More chance to just get a little bit more tape, give a little bit more highlight reel, just kind of get the feel of the process. I don't know. I just see if you have an opportunity like that, why would you waste it? And
he also has the inside info from his brother, so maybe
that's a good point. And his name is going to carry him a little bit,
right? But that's one thing you brought up, Brian Robinson. I mean, those two guys played so deep into the season, and they had 3 weeks before the Senior Bowl. That could have played into the role. Like, hey, I mean, Brian Robinson literally looked fatigued out there. He didn't look like he had any juice left. So maybe that's where they were going with that, is just, don't show it on tape. Just let him relax and come in for the combine all rested up and ready to rock. So
I agree. So as far as the rest of the combine goes, a bunch of the players that are on here we haven't even gotten to look at, pay attention to. So there will be a lot of players that are people that we weren't really high on. Maybe somebody's going to show out. Maybe is Romeo Dubs going to have the best 40 time because Jameson Williams not being there? Romeo Dubs was the best at the Senior Bowl, so maybe he, can really improve his stock there. But as far as questions for the combine, that is the 5 that I have going in. I just have one little comment at the end here, which I forgot to tell Joe, and that's probably a bad call because of the subject matter. However, I'm just going to drop it on him. So Adam Anderson was a linebacker at Georgia. He was arrested on a rape charge, and he is still pending, but it has been announced that he will be allowed to do his own pro day at Georgia. And I don't really know, the court date hasn't happened yet to prove guilt or innocence here, but he is going to be allowed to work out for NFL teams, and for all intents and purposes is still able to be drafted. He obviously isn't welcome at the combine. He was not invited, but he will be able to have his own pro day, which will not be with the rest of the Georgia team members, by the way. It'll be a separate special pro day just for him by himself, where NFL teams will get to ask questions, I think, and kind of get a gauge on what they like. But somebody in this situation, Joe, what do you think going in? Is this obviously, I would think the first day and a half is probably out, but day 3, is Adam Anderson somebody that you would draft right now, given what I have all just explained to you?
If I ran an NFL organization, absolutely not.
Before you even answer, he was projected to be like a top 10, top 15 draft pick. He was one of the best linebackers in this class, but given everything and the circumstances, that's obviously not happened. So,
right, someone's going to take a shot on him, and it's maybe by draft time the allegations and the investigation and stuff will have played out at that point.
He's out on bail right now.
Honestly, no. I mean, someone's going to take a shot on him, and I think if you're running an organization, if you're in the day 3 picks, then it makes sense to take a shot on talent. But I mean, I think what we're looking at here is now going to be more of a late pick or an undrafted free agent, because
I think so too.
You can't drop this at close to this Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I mean, just the fact that we haven't, the court case hasn't happened yet, so you can't even really, there's no resolution to go into this with. There's no explanation really, because you can't really talk about an ongoing legal trial to NFL teams, because that's probably not in your best interest
Right.
based on what gets leaked out of those conversations by the end of it. But I don't know. I just felt that it needed to be mentioned because it was in the news, I think 2 weeks ago, that he was going to be allowed to do a special pro day to actually work out for teams and be able to answer questions. So I felt that it needed to at least be mentioned as we were getting into this combine testing type of mode.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of NFL organizations just cross his name right off the list right here. I mean, just let someone else have him would be my argument to the team.
I would have
There's
to
plenty
agree.
of linebackers out there.
I'm going to have to agree completely. Like somebody's going to take a chance on him. And if you've got the draft capital to waste on somebody who may be going to prison, like by all means, go for it. No. So anyway, we'll wrap this up with a little happier mode. So combine, it starts March 1st. That is a week-ish from today. Can't do math. Doesn't matter.
I don't even know how many days there are in February.
Isn't that the truth?
28.
Yes,
so
28. Yeah, sometimes 29, sometimes 28.
We got 5 days, man.
Yes. So we will be paying attention to the combine. We'll come back next week. We will talk about what has been going on for the first couple of days of the combine, but just needed a little primer, Joe, a little glaze over the combine to get everybody prepared and to see what is going into this.
Absolutely. And the combine is definitely, it's very interesting to watch because these kids really can move up and down in their draft stock just by testing. I always have it on in the background on there. I can't tell you that I sit there and watch it all day because it gets pretty repetitive after a while, but it's great to watch the highlights, read the stories about it and all that stuff, because you do get a lot of news out of this. So when you're in a Devy league, a dynasty league, this is where you can really start to get an edge on your competition. Just by seeing, if this guy is like phenomenally fast and he lands on a team as a wide receiver or a running back too, that needs a fast guy, then you're like, oh, hey, that guy's getting on my team. And this is where you can really start to separate yourself. So pay attention.
Right. And you can follow us at Ombre Vendor, at OPJoe, 2 E's.
2 E's.
You can follow us on Twitter. We'll be kind of collecting all of the clips and the measurements and the things that you are important things that you need to know. It'll be all in one place. You just watch our Twitter timelines and we will make sure that you know everything that is going to happen. So for Joe, for myself, for Semi-Pro Fantasy, this has been the Dynasty Tailgate. Have a great rest of your day, weekend, or week.